In February of 1943, the Germans were in dire straits. Stalingrad was about to fall, and with that city's fall, the Soviet army was about to free up a massive force. The Soviets would start attacking along the entire southern front. The Germans were reeling. In the very southern flank, both sides geared up for the Soviets' next move. Stalin had ordered that the town of Novorossiysk must be taken, and Ivan Petrov was given the task with his Black Sea group of forces. Petrov was an experienced, if so far unsuccessful commander, but he was Zhukov's choice to command the sector and took command from the less talented Melesnikov in October. Petrov wasn't an innovative commander, but while he favored a methodical attack into the Kuban to liberate it, Zhukov demanded more energy. Petrov's staff came up with Operation More Gory. An initial attack was to be made in the rough terrain held by the Romanians, and when pinned down and when reserves were committed, an invasion was to be launched by the Soviet Navy to cut off the entire Axis southern front. The Axis forces, commanded by General Oberst Ruoff, had surprised the Soviet commanders by remaining in Kuban and not retreating over into the Kirk, but the terrain was good here and Hitler had ordered that the position to be held fast. He still had the fantasy of a renewal of the Axis offensive towards the vital oil fields to the south. Ruoff was an able commander, but was out of his depth. His forces with him were quite able and were prepared to defend the Kuban. The Battle of the Little Land was about to begin. Hey guys, welcome back. It is your favorite Gimp of the Limp, and I'm here with The Little Land. The Battle of Novorossiysk is based on the company scale system, and this is by Compass Games. They were nice enough to send me a copy of this one. Now, we've already gone over the history with that little blurb there at the beginning of it, so let's go ahead and go down to the table. We'll go over the components that come with the game and some basics of gameplay. We'll come back up here and have some final. All right, so here we are down at the table. Let's go ahead and look at the components that the game comes with, and then we'll get into how the game itself is played. All right, just like every war game, you're going to have a rule book. You're going to have a scenario booklet. Both rather basic. If you've seen one, you've seen them all. Compass Games, they do good work on those, but we're going to talk a little bit about the specifics in a couple of these books here in just a second. There is also 8 counter sheets. Well, technically 7.5. One of them's a half sheet. The rest of them are full counter sheets. Now, these are the white core counters, which I personally like. I like the white core counters. Always have. They remind me of my early days of wargaming. Only problem with these is you have to clip them yourself, right? So it's not the pre-rounded counters, but it is a little bit of a cost-saving measure, so I understand why they would go with these sometimes. It's really not that big of a deal. I've got the Oregon laminate. I love that thing, but there are a lot of counters, right? 7.5 sheets, that's a lot. So you'll be clipping for a while if you're going to clip all your counters. Standard dice, 2d6, or 2d10, rather, not d6s. There are an assortment of player aids. Now, we're going to talk about those displays up there here in just a second, but there are a couple of these. Both of these are the same, so I'm just showing you one of them. Backside is our terrain effects chart. List down all the different terrain, and again, I like it when they have the tiny little picture in there, so you know that you're looking at the right piece of terrain. And all the good stuff like movement, wheel movement, track movement, does it affect line of sight, blocking, all the other good stuff listed down here. And this has all the charts that we're going to need for the game. Top of it here is our combat results table, modifiers, assault table, different modifiers, color coded so you know you're all looking at the right chart. Like that's definitely appreciated. One thing I would say about this is the print's a little small. It might have been better had it been a larger one and a folding one, something like that, maybe split on 2, just so the print wasn't as small, but it's serviceable. It's easily able to be read, but yeah, I might have to crack out my reading glasses on this because the type is a little bit smaller than I would prefer. Lastly, we have a couple of maps. They are the paper maps, standard paper maps from Compass Games. They're the standard poster size. The one that I have laid out that you can see here is the east map, and there is a west map that goes with this. Now I've got it turned sideways so it fits in my camera easier, but the top is technically that way, right? As you're looking at it, if you are setting up the whole map, you would rotate this 90 degrees to be like that, and they would both link together. It takes up a fair size. That's why I kind of say this one has a little bit of a mini monster thing going with it. Two good size paper mats with a lot of counters gives it almost that monster feel with a lot of space, a lot of territory, a lot of units engaged in it. I like that. I like that. But that is the fourth scenario. There are three others that use just one of the maps. So if space is a concern, you can have a smaller setup, just depending on which one of the scenarios you do choose. Now, here's the only thing I don't like that they did with the map. Generally speaking, they have the columns be the way that they adjust for the or count the hexes on the board, right? So technically top's that way, remember, so you'd look at it this way. So I would expect them to pick this row, right? Looking at it like this and count. So like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, as you're counting on with the hexes. But they didn't do that. They had this weird numbering system. Top down, it is kept track of as far as the second number. So all the hexes are 4 digits. 2 representing basically the vertical and 2 representing the horizontal, right? And for horizontal, it works fine because the hexes are lined up appropriately. So these, I forget where we're at here. Let's see. Yeah, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, counting it on down. That's the second digit. The second set of 2 digits, rather, excuse me. The first set of 2 digits, it's got this weird slide pattern. So it's, let's see, I'll count a couple to show you. All right, so yeah, 25, 25, and then the next 25. So these two are 25. So 25, 25, 25, 25, 25, 25, 25, 25, 25, 25. You see what I'm saying? It kind of finagles its way down, and I'm like, no, why'd you do that? Don't do that. It just throws me off because the vertical, which again is that way, I've got the map tilted to the side, kind of slides down, and it's not as intuitive. I would have rather them just picked the straight rows and gone with that. It would have been so much easier to find the spots that the counters go into. When I was setting up the units here, this is scenario 2 that I have set up. I was looking and I'm like, okay, it's 26, whatever. I'm like, all right, 2630 here. And I'm like, wait, why is the other 26 way over here? This doesn't make sense. And it took me longer to figure out how the hell they had it set up. I understand what they were going for. It's, grid coordinate. They've got these rows, and then the top wasn't even because of the way the hexes were oriented. I would have just pick one direction, either this angle or that angle, instead of directly straight down, because it has this angle as the hexes are going down for those first 2 digits on its coordinates. It just didn't make sense to me. It's a minor gripe. You figure it out rather quick, but it threw me. Also, another minor gripe, they used white for the hex numbers. For the most part, it stands out fine over here, but when we get into these city hexes, white letters on light gray background doesn't work. It's almost impossible to see. Over here, those should have been in black. It just would make things so much simpler. All right, so here we are at some divisional displays. There's a handful of these that come with the game, and there's a lot of them. And they have to be set out because, as you can see, there's counters across here to keep track of all the different points associated with the divisional displays, plus things like routed units or air units, support weapons will all be kept track of up here at the upper part as well. Down here at the bottom, this general records track for the division is the main thing that we're looking at. Now, this game reminds me a lot of Crossing the Line Aiken because of the way that the units are taken care of. Now, that one had a little different activation thing, but over here, it's kind of a similar thing. There's almost like an activation level, a command level for the different divisions, and as you activate them, they'll build up fatigue, and then as the fatigue points build up, it can affect their troop quality and all that good stuff. And Crossing the Line, it had it where there was initiative, and then you would choose a formation to activate. It's not that way here. Here we have a chit draw mechanic, and certain chits will be put in your cup. Some are standard that they'll always be there. That's things like wind or event. They also have, of course, it's going to be the last one I pick up in here. There's a standard just direct command chit for both sides, Soviet and the Germans, and then the individual formations will have their chits put in here when they are bought and paid for. You have to pay for them by using what's called dispatch points in this game. Now, I'm going to show you this, and I talk about this a little bit more in the review part of the game, but this is a mistake I made when I first read the rules for this game, because here's the sequence of play, and it basically gives what the turn is, what's going to happen, what can potentially happen during a turn. Now, most times when I'm reading a rule book, I'll glance over this, but I don't pay it too much attention when I'm first reading it. I get into the nitty gritty. Only problem is our rule book here starts in the actions, right? Activating units, and that's here. Over here is the preparation phase, and for the most part, the preparation phase is only explained here. I would have liked to have seen that expanded a little bit into the rest of the rule book. Things like fatigue. Fatigue is explained here, it's explained here. That affects things like true quality and buying new formation, stuff like that. That just flesh it out a little bit, or I don't care, duplicate it over here. Just that way it's in the rules proper and not just in the sequence of play. Yes, technically expanded sequence of play, but I guess that's on me. I don't always read the example plays. I don't always read the sequence of play because I know that's going to be on a player rate, right? So I'm really reading the rule book to get the rules. Like I said, that's me. That's neither here nor there. If you are like me and you don't always pay as much attention to the examples of play, the sequence of play in the rule book, make sure you pay attention to it in this one, because if you don't, then you won't know how the units activate. All right, I'm going to try to make this a little short, brief, because I don't want to get long-winded. I know I'll start losing your attention if I get too long-winded on this, but just understand that you are able to get dispatch points. You have a dispatch rating with all of the different divisions, okay? That dispatch rating, you will roll a die, you have it, add your dispatch rating to it, it'll give you so many points. You can have up to a maximum of 9 dispatch points. Those points are what you're going to spend, either 1 or 2 points, just depending, to activate a unit. Basically, throw it into the cup to be drawn, right? Now, this chit is for reinforcement that comes in later into the scenario, but let's say they were already on the board. The Soviets would have to spend some dispatch points to be able to throw that into the cup for it to be drawn for the formation to activate, right? However, if you do throw a formation into the cup, it increases the fatigue level for the division. It'll either be 1 or 2 points, 1 point for day, 2 points for night. That is kept track of over here on our little display for our turn sequence. Up here at the top, it shows all the different days, the different hours, and then we do have a couple of night turns here. So these are the ones I'm talking about, that when it's a night turn, it will cost you more dispatch points. And then there's a victory point track and a little weather tracker right there as well. And actually, I was thinking wrong. I was thinking direct command. We'll talk about that in a sec. But dispatch points, you have to roll your dispatch rating or less, and you'll either get 3 or 1 point. So just as an example, our Soviet forces here have a dispatch rating of 5. Let's roll it. Oh, no, we're above it. So we would only get a single dispatch point. So where's my dispatch? Is that on this one? Yep. So we would get that. So we would only be able to add 1 to our dispatch rating. But like I said, if you spend points, dispatch points, let's say we spend that point to activate that formation that I was talking about, thrown in that cup, then there is a counter for keeping track of fatigue, and you will put that there to signify that the division is starting to get tired. You're building fatigue on it, and fatigue, when it gets higher, will start reducing your troop quality. There is a maximum troop quality that is listed down here at the top. You'll keep track of it down here below. And as you fatigue the different divisions, your troop quality will go down. Think of your troop quality kind of like morale in other games. You will be rolling against that troop quality for things like routing checks. Just remember, when it comes to the dispatch rating, if you're activating a unit during the day, 1 point, night, 2 points. If you don't activate a unit during a night turn, then you get to reduce its fatigue, 1 point for each one of those night turns. So it does behoove you to kind of hold back a little bit if you over fatigue them during the day. But again, that's going to give your opponent a chance. Maybe he played it a little more cautious during the day, didn't sweat his units, so he's going to be able to throw some of those points towards the night and be able to attack you when you're not ready for it. The whole system up here with all the different displays, and there's a lot of these that can be added to the game, just depending on what formations are part of the game, right? What divisions are in the scenario. Obviously, for the campaign scenario where you're playing the whole thing, all of the displays will be laid out, so you are going to need a pretty good size table. It is easy to know what counters can not have to go in the cup, can go in the cup, because they will have this blue background that says little land on it, right? If they don't have that, like some of these look very similar, right? This little formation counter, it looks similar to these, but these do not have that blue background. That can help you when you're first setting this up. I was looking at it, I was like, wait, do these counters go in there? I'm like, no. These are the ones that go in the cup because they have to have the blank backside, so it can't be seen, and you're just, randomly drawn from your cup. All right, so here we are down with some units. Proper, these are the first ones that start out in scenario 2. We have our Soviet units up here. They are doing an amphibious landing and assaulting the city of Novorossiysk, and there are some German units located in here defending the city. So how is the game played? Well, generally speaking, once you're past that activation point, once you actually activate either a formation or a division, basically the division, when you activate that, you get more units that you can activate across the board. It is easy to tell who belongs to what because there is a colored stripe across a unit, like these guys have the green colored stripe, they're green. Where's a white one? Okay. The Germans located over here, just in case you can't see them because they're blending in with the city. Ones that have a white stripe, think of them kind of like attachments. So they'll be attached to a division, right? But generally speaking, when their counter is drawn or you pay the points to activate their formation, they're going to do the usual things that you would see in a war game. That's when you're going to move, that's when you're going to shoot, that's when you're going to assault, or potentially rally to try to recover your troops if they are suppressed, like our Soviet troops unfortunately start off suppressed in this scenario. Now, this is a neat aspect to the game because, again, this is my first time with the CSS system, company scale system. When we're looking at our counters here, like I said, you got your little thing there at the top, tells who they are, symbol in here in the center, but come on, counter, get there. When you're looking at your counter, you've got these stats across the bottom. Left is its combat value. Middle is its defense value. Right is its movement points. All right. And the cool thing about it is your combat value is color coded. Red means small arms. If it is black, it's, indirect? Oh, I got to look it up. Black is indirect. Blue is armor piercing. High explosive is yellow. And if it's white, it can either be high explosive or armor piercing, depending on what target you're firing at. And I really, really, really like that about this game. We'll touch on that a little bit more here in a sec. The defensive value on our counters, a positive value, is actually bad because that is being added to the unit's combat strength that fires upon that unit. Basically means the unit isn't in a good defensive position, or maybe it's moving, like this unit is in its moving stance, because the units can have two stances. They can either be column, where they're moving, or they can be deployed, where they're not moving. And you see here, now there's no defensive value. That means they're actually better. It doesn't have a modifier one way or the other. that positive modifier is worse. So a negative modifier there is actually better. It means you will reduce a enemy's combat strength when they fire upon you. But units can be deployed. If they're deployed, it will say no because they can't move, but it will change their combat strength. In this case, it increases his combat strength to 3. That's not a big deal because it's still red. But let me get a good example. I think I got one here. There's a Marine one. No. I had one. Where is he? Where is he? All right, like this Soviet unit here. This is its column side. You see, very vulnerable when it's in this column side. Gives its movement and has just a very light, small arms fire. This is a heavy machine gun, I believe. I could be wrong, but I believe it's that. But, or no. This is gun piece. I think a towed gun, maybe. This is deployed side, and you see now it's got a different color for its combat value. No, obviously for the movement, and I believe a different number. Yeah, it reduces the defensive penalty that this unit receives. But notice that small little superscript says 6 next to it. That's actually the unit's range, and that is something I really like about this game. Is a lot of games at this scale and above. So once you get into company, brigade, regiment, division, so on and up all the way to army, generally speaking, most games have a 6x zone of control around the unit, and you can only attack next to it. So a lot of times shooting the unit next to you feels a lot like assaulting the unit next to you because that's it. Your range is 1 hex, and that's for all the units. But in this game, it's not that. It's actually scaled down to the point to where we can have ranges for our units. Like this one has a range of 5. This one has a range, it's long range indirect fire. It's got a range of 32. The Soviets have units across that bay over there. I think they have a range of like 80 or some shit. But it gives that feel. In a way, the game has a little bit of like a miniatures-esque feel to it because there is range. And that changes this game to no longer have that just standard 6 hexes around it, your zone of control. You can actually have a field of fire up to their range and perform opportunity fire and all that good stuff up to that unit's range. So like our German unit here with the white firepower, that can either be high explosive or armor piercing, just depending. And they can flip over. If they flip over, you see they've got 2, so it's just small arms fire for that one. But that gives this game this interesting feel to it, where it's not just everything is right next to it. It kind of shows a realistic combat value to it, that when units are attacking at this scale, there is an actual range to it. A lot of games at this scale and above just stick with that very basic, you can attack the hex next to you. And to me, that's always just felt samey when it came to direct fire and assaults. It's like, really, it's not that big of a deal. You just pick whatever number is best. Here, you've actually got some choice to it. Plus, let me find the right item here. You have things like this support weapon. All right, so here we have an AT rifle. You can tell it's the support weapon. It's got the SW there on it. And with a support weapon, you see it's got a +0. It doesn't actually add any firepower. What it does is give you a choice to change your firepower to blue. So you could actually attack a tank with this. So the other units that are stacked with it, right? So far, little Marines here was stacked with this. They could choose to use either their red or the blue firepower because they now have a support weapon that gives them the ability to do that. Now, obviously, there are support weapons that increase firepower as well. Other support weapons give things like sustained fire, which will allow you to kind of keep firing at a space, which is nice as well. Things like this one, actually, this heavy machine gun can do the sustained firepower. You also have the ability to barrage a hex. Barrage will place a counter into the hex, which will apply negative penalties to a unit, and you can do indirect fire against your own units, not to hit them with HE, but to toss in smoke to give them cover. Our charts and tables here, you can see it is color-coded because You can fire at a hex, and just think of that anytime you're firing at like infantry, you're going to be looking over here at the left. Hard targets are going to be things like your tanks. Armor values, you're going to use these right values, right? I like the way this combat system works as well, because you will just going to take any of these modifiers, right? Whole bunch of different modifiers that can come into play, and they do not affect the die roll. They affect the combat value, right? So let's say our German unit here was firing, has a combat value of 4. Any modifiers are going to increase or decrease its combat value. Let's say ultimately its combat value was modified to a 5. You will roll your D10. In this case, we got a 2. A 2 would be a hit. Lower numbers are actually better in this game. When you roll your D10, you are looking to roll equal to your modified combat value or under. So if they were rolling red, they got a 2 on their die. That would give them a DG and a R. So DG is disorganized and R's count as routing. The only other thing you have to worry about are E's over here. E's are obviously eliminated. You'll notice if we look at our chart here, there's no E's over here on this left side. You're not really just going to eliminate enemy units flat out when firing at like softer targets or infantry. What you're going to be doing is placing things like disorganized counters on the hex, which will progressively go up. Disorganized 1, 2, 3, 4. And you can also grab these counters. You can get a pinned result or suppressed result. These will add up, and a couple of suppressed will eliminate the unit. And once they are disorganized level 4, black side back here, which you can see imparts some severe penalties. -3 modifier to their firepower, -2 to their troop quality. They're really been beat down. Any disorganized results above that, or you get more suppression, stuff like that, will start eliminating the units. So basically think of it like you're firing upon the units more and more and more until they start keeping their heads down. Now they're pinned. Well, now they're suppressing. Now you start killing them off. And honestly, that's pretty much the game. When you activate, you'll draw your counter. You'll activate whatever units you're going to activate. The opponent will have chances to conduct opportunity fire if they do have the enemy in line of sight, range, and correct units able to be activated to do opportunity fire. And then the activated units will either be able to move, attack, assault, rally, or do indirect fire. All right, now I'm going to show you a couple things while I'm here. I do, like I said, I like this system. I especially like the color-coded combat system. It's the first time I've played around, like I said, with the CSS system, and I really like that. Units are either deployed, they're a column, that changes their stats. They can fire with different types of varying combat vectors. They can use the support weapons to change their attack. All that, so good. A couple things aren't so good. The rulebook and the scenario booklet here really needed a little more time in the oven, because there are some goofs here. Things like wrong hexes are printed, special rules not being associated with the right units, wrong unit printed, and I get it. It's errata. It's not that big of a deal. But for example, this one threw me hard when I first started reading on it. And that's because it's got a special rule here talking about the 3 German Romanian units. And it was referring to 3 indirect fire units, which means they should have black firepower, like these guys, right? So these units here. But the Romanian units all had red firepower, all of them. These units. And I'm like, that doesn't make any sense. What the hell's going on? And I was finally able to find out that special rule was actually used for scenario 1, and it was supposed to be changed to apply to these 2 German units. Took me a little while. I had to find it on thread on BGG before I finally found it. Long and short of it is the rule book and the scenario booklet needed more time in the oven, and that's a sad thing to see, because the game system is actually quite good. It just needed to be fleshed out a little bit more, especially a lot of stuff at the beginning when it comes to divisions, dispatch points, the fatigue points, and how all that works. I would have liked to have seen that somewhere else besides just in the sequence of play. And then a fair amount of errata when it comes to especially snare booklet and the roll booklet that really just it's like that thing. No plan survives first contact with the enemy. No rule book or scenario booklet survives first contact with the public. Obviously, we're going to find stuff. No matter how much they look, they can't find all of it. But there's more here than should have gotten past the checkers. You guys know I love Compass, but I had to ding them on that one. Anyway, that's the majority of the gameplay. Yes, there's other things going on. There's heroes, there's commissars, there's named characters. There's a lot more minutia in the game as well. But we are already getting a little long-winded, so let me head back up and do some final thoughts on the game. All right, so we're back. You guys have seen what all comes with the game, and some of the good, some of the bad, and we're gonna get into it. When it comes to the good, let's start there. There is a lot to like. I especially like the company scale system, right? The basic core system and how it works. I especially like the color coded combat system. I like the fact that different units have different types of ordnance that they're going to use. Small arms, armor piercing, high explosive. Some forces have choice when it comes to that, and I think it gives a good variety to the gameplay, right? And in a way, it almost gives it this miniatures game feel using counters, using a standard hex and counter war game. Because in this, it's not just that standard zone of control that you've seen in a lot of other games. You don't just control the 6 hexes around a counter and that's it, right? There are actual fields of fire that you can set up because units have ranges. It allows them to control an area farther than just the 6 hexes around them, but it is accurately simulated because yes, this is at a company scale. So units that have small arms, just machine guns and rifles, are not going to be projecting fire that far across the map. So they are limited to just those 6 hexes around them. But other units that have different types of ordnance are going to be able to reach out and touch someone. I also like the units are distinguished in the fact that they have their 2 modes, their 2 sides, right? They're column or they're deployed. So they're either ready for battle or they're moving. And that's going to affect their stats, especially their combat stats and their defensive stats, right? Their combat stats can change completely. A unit might have a white factor, right? White factor, I believe, is either armor piercing or high explosive. But if it flips over into its movement side rather than its deployed side, well, now it's just got a small arms factor just to simulate the fact that, they're transporting their heavier weaponry that's not able to fire, but they do have a few rifles and submachine guns that they can use for basic self-defense. And also the way that those defensive factors work with the different units, that it's a little odd at first, takes you a sec to get used to it, but a positive number on a unit is actually a bad thing, right? Because that means that a unit firing upon them is going to get a positive modifier to their combat factor, right? A positive defensive modifier is bad, but a negative one is good. It means they are more defensive. They're actually subtracting from that combat strength of a unit that does attack them. And again, that's going to switch depending on if the unit's deployed or if they are marching, if they're in column formation. I really do think this combat system gives the game a unique feel that I don't see in a whole lot of other games. So many other games out there had the standard, the combat results table, 6 X's is your zone of control. Doesn't matter what the unit is, they can only shoot next to them. And attacking a hex next to you is very similar to assaulting a hex next to you. You might use different numbers, but it's really not that big of a deal. It's kind of the same thing. But in this one, no, it is different. You can have a unit held all the way across the map, reaching out and touching someone if they have, some spotters. Obviously, they're not going to have line of sight more than likely, But if they got some spotters, they can drop in some ordnance, and I like that. It almost reminded me a little bit of World War 85, a little bit, in that you've got your artillery assets in the back, and you're going to be launching those in to weaken, to barrage the enemy, and you can choose to do that. You can barrage some hexes and pin those enemy forces. I really like that. I think that works really well in this game. Also, of course, the chit draw mechanic is good. I've loved chit draw mechanics in damn near every game that has them. It is so good for solitaire play because it gives you that random factor that you're going to need. Now, there is basically a way to buy initiative. You can spend some dispatch points to pick a specific formation to activate, and that kind of skirts the chit drawing. The chit drawing will commence again after that. Both sides do have the ability. Whoever has the initiative, they can spend points, buy a formation to activate, go ahead and activate them. So you've got kind of a little leeway in the chit draw. It's not completely chit draw. There is a little bit of point spending to kind of steal it, jump in there if you want to with a specific formation, but you are limited by points. The opponent does have a chance to do that themselves, but once your chit has been drawn, it's set. You have to wait for the next opportunity, which is going to be the next time you draw on a chit, to be able to spend those points. And I also find that the game has this kind of mini monster feel to it. There are a lot of counters to the game. I think it's 6 or 7 sheets. I can't remember exactly how many come in the game, but there is a lot. And it's 2 big maps covering a fairly substantial amount of area. And that combined with all the counters and everything else that's going on with the chit draw, it feels big, right? It feels big. Now, that is good and bad. Like I said, when we were down at the table, I like big maps. I like a lot of units spread all across the map. It just looks good when you get everything set up. The drawback to that is to have that, you have to have all those displays set up. And I think there's something like 6 or 7 of those different divisional displays. And that ends up taking a lot of space. Now, for us war gamers, we're used to games taking a lot of space. So usually we can make it work. But sometimes I'm like, oh, I want to focus here. I want to focus. I want to be at the table. I want to be rolling the dice and playing the game. I don't want to have to step over to the side and, okay, what am I doing over here on this divisional thing? It's a small kind of a niggle to it. I like the big gameplay that you can have with it, but there is that drawback. You got all these displays spread around. So, mostly good. Mostly good with a little, it's taking a little bit too much space. Okay, so let's get into the not so good, the stuff that I didn't like as much when it came to the game. The map. Okay, I don't like the map. I don't like the way they labeled the hexes. This is my personal thing. It might be different for you. Everybody has their own, preferences when it comes to it, but I just didn't like the way they labeled the hexes. The couple spots, definitely the lettering should have been in a different color because it was harder to see. Most of the units all stand out perfectly fine on the map. There's just a very few places, strangely enough, the exact scenario I chose, where German units match up pretty close to the terrain with the gray German units matching with the gray cityscape. Not that big of a deal. You can still see the units, but one of those, but there's a lot of multicolored units, different color stripes and all that in the game. So there's only so many colors they can pick from. They can't make the Germans blue or chartreuse or green or whatever, because why were you making the Germans this? Germans are predominantly black or gray. So that's what people tend to expect. So I don't really hold that too much against them. The rules themselves are a bit of a mess. Like I said in the video itself, it needed more time in the oven before it got out. There's, like I said, no plan survives first contact with the enemy. I get that. So this is like a publisher releasing the game, but there was enough there that I think it could have had a fair bit more caught before it got to that point. Like I said, every game will have issues. There will never be a perfect game release. There will always be an error in there, some more spelling errors or mislabeled units or the wrong unit put down, wrong hex, whatever it is. Every game's going to have it. I think there's like a level, and you can't really even put your finger on a very specific level, but there's a level where it's like acceptable. This amount and below is acceptable. And I think this game is just a little bit beyond that. There's enough in there that's like, come on, like that one example play is just horrible. Now, yes, they did rewrite it in the errata, but that thing was so bad it was unreadable. I mean, the spelling errors were so bad in there. The wrong symbols, the wrong this, wrong that. Like you couldn't understand what the example of play was trying to convey to you because it was so badly written, and that made it into the rule book. And it was like, how did that make it in there? And something else I would have done is I would have had a lot more about that initial part. Like I said, I tend to skim the sequence of play in a rule book. Yeah, I'll sit down and actually read it at some point, but especially when I'm first learning the rules, I don't pay a whole huge amount of attention to the examples of play, the sequence of play, those little extras that are in the rule book. I read the rules and then I come back and I read the rules again and I pay attention to all the extra stuff that's in there. And when I first read the rules, I was like, well, it mentioned fatigue, but it doesn't say, what does fatigue do? Where is it? I can't find it. And it's in the sequence of play. And that's the only place it's referenced, is that expanded sequence of play. So yeah, I would have liked to have seen that whole first part, that preparation phase, just expanded, added into the rules, just to, cross your I's, dot your T's, an extra page or two, just to flesh it out, just to ensure it's written right. Couple spots that are, kind of fiddly. There's one towards the end of the rule book where it's talking about the troop quality, for example, that it says, the troop quality, a division's troop quality can be lowered, but can never exceed its base value. And then the very next sentence is, a unit's troop quality can go up or down through game mechanisms and can exceed its base value. And I'm like, you're almost saying opposite things in back-to-back sentences. And it's really not, but the way it's written, it kind of seems like it. You have to read it a couple of times to, kind of sink it in. And the first sentence is referencing the division itself. The division's troop quality can never go above whatever its base value is. But a troop's troop quality, like the actual unit itself, its troop quality can exceed that base value through certain game mechanics. Okay, I get what you're saying now, but it took me a minute, because first time I read that, I was like, this doesn't make sense. And there are a couple spots that the rules, I think, would have been better put in some more different location in the robot. Like I said, that the display and dispatch points and command points, direct commands, all that's towards the back of the rule book. That really should be at the beginning. It's part of the preparation phase. Have it there. And also, I would have expanded maybe a little bit when it came to hero units, special leaders. Some of those do have differences on when they're attached, and that really has to do with like the division and its display and the counters that you're drawing, the activation counters. But some of those rules are listed under heroes and leaders, and I'm like, that's not where I'm going to look for that rule, right? So leave it there because it's associated with that leader, but maybe put like an addendum there for the display and the dispatch points and all that. Hey, FY, hero units do X, Y, and Z, blah, 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 when it comes to adding their chit to the cup. It's referenced here in the rule book, but hey, just so you know, make sure you keep that in your brain pan. Ultimately, though, I really did like the little land. It's on sale right now, too. I didn't realize how many games were in the CSS system. There's actually 7 released now, and there's 2 in the modern setting. I did not know there were games set in the modern setting. Even running a war game channel, I can't keep track of everything that gets released. Plus, your brain injury kind of forgets everything. But I like the system. I like how it works. Really love that color-coded system with combat. I love the combat being equal to or under on that combat results table. It's very easy to understand. The modifiers, while plentiful, are not overly cumbersome. It's all listed down there, and you know that you're just changing that combat strength. There's no modifiers after rolling the die. It's just whatever it is or under, and zeros always hit, nines always miss. Real easy to understand, and it gives the game a very nice flavor that I really like. I mean, the units feel individualistic rather than some other games of, like I said, this scale and above, especially above. The units, infantry and tanks and whatnot, can feel rather samey. Yeah, that's an infantry unit. It's got a combat strength of 3, and that's a tank unit. It's got a combat strength of 4. See the difference? And it's like, really, there's not much of a difference. Mechanized unit might move farther. It might go a few extra hexes, but here you can actually feel the difference. You need different types of attacks. You need different types of attacks to damage things like hard targets. And I really like that. I like that. Really like how indirect fire works too. So, yeah, definitely impressed with the CSS system. I am looking forward to playing more games in that system. The only thing that I really have to ding this game on is to really just critique that rule book there. The errata was rather high. It was rather high for a game of this nature. It could have been fixed a fair bit better before it got out. I don't know. Maybe this one slipped through the cracks, whatever it is. Everyone makes mistakes. I won't hold it against them. And Compass is fairly good when it comes to putting out errata and fixing counters and fixing whatever issues that they have with their games. They're rather on top of that. Like I said, no one's perfect, but they're rather good at fixing it. I will say though, I did notice on their site this one is on sale, and it showed $30. I don't know how long that sale is going to last, but it's at 30, and I don't care how much Rato's in it. It's definitely worth it at 30. So definitely go take a look, jump on that one if you want to take advantage of the sale. Anyway, that's going to be it for me. Y'all take care, and I'll catch you in the next one.